Let's get started. This is
there a volume?
volume.
It's all the way up now? Okay. You might have to just repeat.
No, volume's not. It's halfway. Okay. All right. Call to order June 5th, 2018 meeting of the Planning Board. First order of business, we will have one person, one of our members, Jennifer Luz, is going to join us through remote participation. I find that she does have a hardship as she's in Dallas, Texas, which is a hardship for anybody. So she will be joining us, and Jen, you can hear us and see as well, correct?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we are going to start. We had a request to start with discussion 315 Turnpike, Merrimack College, Mr. Schwartz. So we'll let you go first.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking us out of order about the family for this, but I really appreciate it. For the record, my name is Felipe Schwartz. I'm Associate Vice President for Campus Planning and Facilities at Merrimack College. And what we submitted before you is a waiver of site plan review for a project that we're trying to do this summer, and that is to rebuild and expand an existing parking lot known as Lot C that runs along the Route 114 portion of campus. This is a lot that has about 123 parking spaces currently. It's kind of a mess at times because we have a combination of angled parking and straight parking. And after the year that we just had of opening Crow Hall, we experimented with some overflow parking on a more regular basis within the grass areas and just tried to gauge the need and the proximity to where people want to park in different parts of campus. So this project represents that. We'd like to take over those green grass areas you see, as well as some other portions along the Mendel Science Center to the right of the plan. This also allows us to do a couple of things that we don't have in that area. One is to provide a sidewalk for pedestrians along that area that park, whether to the left of the plan or all the way to the athletic complex. We also, by doing this project, we increase, or we provide a safer two-way travel along this portion of campus that's separated by an island. So overall, between the regularizing of parking spaces, from taking them from grass to paved and creating a formal parking lot, as well as providing sidewalk, lighting, landscaping, we believe the project has its merits for what we're doing on campus, as well as providing a benefit to those that drive along 114 in this area. The waiver of site plan review criteria talk about impacts, and I think I've laid them out in the three-page document before you. We talk about impact to pedestrian and vehicle traffic in North Andover. It's our opinion that this is an internal campus parking lot. Obviously, public use it to visit, but for the most part, this is a faculty, staff, and student parking lot 80% of the time. We're not proposing any sort of curb cuts or anything that may impact Route 114. We have no impact of public services with this project. In fact, I would argue that we actually are improving our ability to provide safer travel for first response vehicles. The drainage portion of this project, as all of our projects are reviewed by the Andover Conservation Commission, so we'll be filing with them shortly. That deals with our stormwater master plan that governs the entire campus. So as you may have seen in the past, Andover has done that review. We have no wetland resources within this project. There are no historic resources affected with this project. And in terms of community needs, our community on campus is really really looking for improved parking in this portion of campus because we are next to academic buildings that are used regularly. This project also allows us to regularize some of the handicap parking once the Welcome Center moves out of the McQuaid Library, which is the building in the center of the plan. We would like to dedicate those, what we call the spaces in the horseshoe, for handicap spaces for those that come to campus and are within the academic quad area. So we would love to get started soon. I think if we were able to obtain a waiver, this project can hopefully start during the summer as well as finish by the time students come back.
Are you modifying or adding to the existing lighting of the site,
So
this
we-
parking site?
So we have lighting along Route 114 that went in. There's lighting along the building portions of this parking lot. We will have some lighting along the two-way travel lane that
That's
is
new
directly.
New lighting?
Yep,
or
yep, we'll have decorative lighting that kind of adds to the streetscape of the campus.
Do you know to what extent the lighting, I guess the lighting footprint when it's on, is that a larger footprint than it currently exists?
Right now, the intent is just to keep that lighting associated with the parking lot, as well as anything along the sidewalk portion of the project.
So I think, I'll preface this by saying I think what you're doing at Merrimack in terms of planning, in terms of academics, in terms of athletics, just overall is fantastic. I don't think you meet the bylaw for a waiver, because as I read the bylaw, it says that the alteration or reconstruction of an existing structure or new use or change in use, so look, that seems like we have that, will not have a significant impact both within the site and in relation to adjacent properties. Now, you've talked about the adjacent properties. I'm not sure I fully agree about the impacts, because I just don't think that we know enough about what the project's going to be and how it's going to impact traffic or butters or the stormwater, stuff like that. But clearly, it's going to have a significant impact, probably for the better, within the site. And as I'm reading the bylaw, it doesn't talk about negative or have a negative consequence. It just will not have a significant impact. And even here, it says the proposed work will significantly improve vehicular and campus pedestrian access. I mean, I think this type of project frankly calls out for site plan review. I mean, I was more comfortable when we had when you came in for the insubstantial change on the fields with the graduation and what you were doing there. I was comfortable that that was small enough and not impactful enough and laid out enough that that was insubstantial. I'm just not convinced on this one, so I kind of think that this should be a site plan review. So I don't know if anyone else has thoughts or questions, but that's kind of where my head's
Yeah, I
at.
have a number of questions, and maybe you could answer it just to frame it. First of all, on the picture that we see here, what's the new part? I know the other one has sort of what the new part, but I'm just not totally sure where all the new spaces are in this.
So that's existing condition that's been done. We
Right.
actually have a drive lane both to the north and south of that middle parking lane.
So where are the additional spaces? Because that
Basically,
looks like
the
they
items
had-
in green for the most part, as well as an
Yeah,
additional area.
Okay, so you're going further down, okay, okay.
Yeah, and that's basically where Austin Hall, if you come onto campus, there's a stop sign right at that left intersection.
Okay.
So we're not in front of the church.
So you still have 3 rows, if you will, but it goes further
Yep.
along. Okay. Now, how much closer to 114 are you, does it go? I mean, how far away from the right-of-way was it before, and how far is it now?
It creeps about 15 feet closer, so we're 20 feet from the right-of-way boundary to the closest edge of parking.
Right. We have a 100-foot right-of-way within 114 that we have to
Yeah.
respect.
Yeah. And do you have are you creating like from the edge of where the parking is to out to 114 itself, any visual buffer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be landscape along there. I mean, that is an edge of campus that as people drive by, we're going to want to improve. I mean, we'll be investing landscape in that area to really dress that up. Obviously, the banners, the fence, the sidewalk have all helped with that compared to what was there before. So we're adding to that.
The other kind of primary landscape area is that island in the middle as well that we use for some additional plantings.
Right.
Okay. And in terms of the stormwater, which you mentioned goes to Andover, normally stormwater is something we would look at in the context of our site plan review. Do you have all that stuff ready now, or?
Yeah, stormwater design is.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, introduce yourself. Jeff Garrett's with VHB, we're the civil engineers. The stormwater report was filed with Andover Conservation this morning. That will take in front of them for review with the stormwater master plan, as Felipe mentioned. So that's documenting our compliance with the Mass DEP standards, Town of North Andover stormwater bylaws, and the Town of Andover stormwater regulations as well. So that has been submitted to Andover today, and we'll be forwarding a copy to Monica for the board if as needed.
And if I understand right, the drainage design is to bring it towards the detention basin over near, it was the former
Correct.
lacrosse field, I don't know if it's still
Yeah.
lacrosse field.
Correct,
but
right across
the
from Elm
basin-
Street.
So where the parking area just went in, there's a
No,
basin?
no, that's a different detention basin.
Yeah, this one's tributary to the
Across Elm
basin
Street.
across Elm Street.
Oh, across Elm
Yeah.
Street.
Yeah.
We have two detention
Right.
basins.
I thought it
Just
was
on
going to the
the
other
Town
one.
of Andover line.
You had mentioned earlier that you felt this was better access for emergency personnel. Did you get an opinion from the town police and fire on that
No, but
assertion?
we've, not formally, but we've seen in the existing conditions plan, if you can scroll up, you'll see how it's basically parking on both sides of that aisle, and that's not actually an island, those are just striped spaces. So people just inevitably, they overpark that line, people back out more, so this provides an opportunity to really eliminate one side of that, so that can happen a little bit more streamlined. So we get out of that situation as well. And in its current condition right now, that's one way going to the right and one way going to the left through the parking lot. So now we're able to bring 2 lanes on the bottom end and not have to drive through a full parking lot in the proposed plan.
The dimensions for the drive aisle and parking spaces meet what we have in our zoning bylaw?
Yeah, they're 25-foot widths for the drive aisles.
Anybody else have any questions, comments?
So I'll just comment on the recent projects that were approved at this site, even though they did go through site plan review. The stormwater drainage did go through Andover's review, however, our permits conditioned that we get all those documents, and so they're all shared with us, and we get to review them, and they provide the monitor, but share the report. So that's how we handle that.
I guess the question I would have to get at the procedural issue, because I understand where you're coming from on this one, and I always have a problem with these. I'm sort of more on the fence, frankly, about it. I mean, even though generally I always prefer more scrutiny than not. If we could complete all the due diligence we're going to do anyway on this type of review, either tonight or based on stuff that we asked for now, I feel like we've substantively been able to deal with it and comply with it. I mean, I think technically let's face it, there's not going to be any abutter comment on something like this. So it's not a question where we want to get input. It's a question of, in my mind, are we doing the sufficient due diligence that it's our job? And I feel like maybe we can get there on this one. I mean, that would be for me. But I guess what is missing that we need?
I guess for me, so I see your point. I'm just not as comfortable, and maybe it's just being newer. That it seems like it's a good project, seems like good ideas. That it doesn't seem to be. We don't have the stormwater information, and it just seems to me that if I'm just right now just going on the waiver of site plan. It seems to me that this is a big enough project in a significant enough area that it should go through site plan review. And so we could wind up with all the same information. I like the formality, and to me, if it's a may, which it is in here, that it's within our discretion to give a waiver, I'd have to be convinced that it's not going to have a significant impact, and it may not, but I'm not convinced that it won't. So I don't know if we'll get more information, but I'm not as I'm pretty hesitant to go with a waiver on something unless it's really small, and this isn't small. I mean, it looks like a good project, but it seems like there's enough questions and enough of a potential impact, especially where this is this is a long 114. I have no idea what kind of traffic impact, if any, it will have, changing the parking structure. I think the questions about landscaping are good ones. We don't have that on there. And then how this affects the rest of the site. I mean, does this lead to other changes at the college? I mean, I just don't know. And at this point, I guess we have options, right? So someone could make a motion to grant a waiver, and we could grant a waiver. We could ask for more information and then grant a waiver, or we could say, or we could do neither of those, and then it just goes through site plan. We don't have to make any motions. So my thought would be I wouldn't not be inclined to grant a waiver, but if someone wants to either make a motion to do so, we could take a vote on it, or we could ask if someone wants more information with the chance of granting a waiver, we could do that. But I know that's where my head's at, so where people.
Question, what are the plans for snow storage with the new configuration?
Oh, there's a variety of different ways we can deal with snow. I mean, we've mounted snow to the left and to the right. We've pulled snow off parking lots to put on other parts of campus. It's,
So part
in
of the reason,
this configuration, we would not, I know for a fact that we would not be, putting snow banks along 114 like that.
well, it's kind of the reason I'm asking, and I'm in support of this project. I appreciate what you're doing. From what I know, it looks like a great project, but I do have some unanswered questions, and I also feel like we're pressing you a little bit, sort of in a time crunch, and I feel like we shouldn't be doing that. So it makes sense to me to hear tonight that it wouldn't be along 114, but it's a much wider parking lot space now and longer. So there's a greater volume of snow to be moving. And it's one thing to say here that won't happen, but the snowplow driver at 3 in the morning when it's snowing like crazy, I wonder about the snow storage along 114 there. And again, I think it's a great project, but I just feel like we're in an awkward position pressing you for a number of items that we're pressing you because we don't know, and it's kind of putting you in a bad position a little bit because I'm not sure we're getting the full information back. And
Well, aren't those, I mean, those are kind of the things that a site plan review would.
That's what I'm
get-
saying.
Right, no,
Yeah.
I agree, and I understand why you would want to go for the waiver, so you could get this done faster, and then you can make these decisions as you're kind of going. That makes sense to me, but then if it winds up being something that we wouldn't approve, we're kind of stuck, so.
how about the answer to John's question I thought, Gene, on what information do we not have now, or Monica, what do we not have now that we would need?
You would have the stormwater information, you could have more landscaping information, you would have the more description of the lighting facilities, so landscape plan, location of any signs, if they're going to do that.
So if we had basically the site plan review materials without the public hearing, I mean, is that basically what we're saying?
What I'm saying is, I want to keep with the spirit of the process, because I don't want to be overly prescriptive, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on in Merrimack that, we might find in the end is more of a concern to us, and we don't even look at it, we don't even know. So we shouldn't delude ourselves that, that we're scrutinizing everything. So I'm comfortable either way, frankly. I could see the logic of waiting for site plan review. I would prefer to see if we could do it without a formal site plan review, but do everything we would have in a site plan review and perhaps get it done a little faster. I say that very carefully, and I think a little bit in the same way that, Etienne, you said, like with the athletic fields, you took that into consideration. I feel it's not quite as far along in the spectrum as you do, but, that's what I would prefer, but I could go, if the predominant opinion was for site plan, I could go for that too.
I think if we meet the spirit with all the information that we would otherwise have, and without a formal public hearing, we could move it along faster, I'd be fine with that. But I feel like we're kind of pressing for information here that we don't really have.
So
What's the construction duration that you're anticipating for completing this project?
We'd like to start, we're hearing anywhere between 6 to 10 weeks. So depending on, we're out to bid right now on contractors. We're up to finish by the fall. If not, we'll make some contingency plans in terms of access and stuff like that.
You say fall, when is, what part of fall?
September 1st.
September 1st?
Yeah.
Okay. So really, you're anticipating having this for the return of students?
Oh, yeah. Ideally, that's an ideal condition. Just listening to the conversation, and we've gone round and round as to how we approach permitting. Obviously, we'd love to achieve a waiver, but we also, just so you know, we've also applied under special permit as well. So if this doesn't work out, we are able to, I think we're on the next agenda under a formal site plan review. So if that's the case, then,
So at their own risk, they've already noticed it, it's already
Yeah.
scheduled to be noticed, it's on the
Okay.
next one, but they wanted a good read tonight. I think we can prepare a decision for the next one.
Yeah.
I think it would be important to get the fire department review.
Yes.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
you know, a
Okay.
sign
Yeah.
plan and just any
a
type of
landscape, we can talk about traffic. I mean, traffic, we're not adding use here. We're just formalizing
I
parking.
think you have the
So-
information, it's just not included at this
Yep,
point.
yeah, we can do a traffic memo to that effect.
If a different pattern within, I mean, I don't imagine that'll change traffic within 114, but if you did somehow change it within the campus, it could back up, you know, just
Right.
something to make us
Yeah, we
not
could do a
worry.
traffic memo that kind of memorializes that and how we're addressing traffic and signage and
Well, so-
wayfinding and things
So
like
if
that.
that's the case, then I think we can get to the same place for the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
I naively thought that as a positive project, it's no significant impact, no significant negative impact, but I understand your point. So I think we can,
Increase in impervious area, it's not much, right?
It's a little under an acre,
Increase in impervious area?
Yeah.
It's a little under an acre, okay.
and that'll be offset as part of the basins.
Yep.
what is next? Isn't that a trigger for,
Land disturbance is over an acre of
Right.
land disturbance in total.
Right.
So two different questions I was
Yeah, so
asking.
total is probably
Yeah.
about three.
It's well
3.5
over an acre, yeah.
acres
I measured it
of
today.
our limit of work there, yeah.
So if you go through the site plan review, we don't trigger the land disturbance, so I think
Gotcha.
it's just a better path for you.
okay.
Okay,
All right, so I think
Great.
we have some homework and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
thank you.
Thank you for your time, appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Why don't we do the bond releases? So why don't we start with the Great Lake Lane? I feel like we do a lot with Great Lake Lane. Just keeps coming up.
So, as you're aware, there was a warrant article you sponsored for this year's
Oh,
town
yeah.
meeting. It passed, so the street has been accepted. The street layout plan has been recorded, the deed has been recorded, the selectmen's vote has been recorded. Tim Willett provided a memo tonight in support of full bond release. There's an $11,000 bond still posted, plus interest. Tom is requesting that all bond funds be released.
So I make a motion on that effect to release all remaining bond for the Glades, given that we've got a letter from DPW to that effect.
Second.
Okay, we got to do a roll call vote. All votes tonight have to be roll call because of the
I,
remote
John
participation.
Simons, vote yes on this motion.
I, Aaron Preston, vote yes on this motion.
Jen, motion.
Sorry, is it my turn? I vote yes in favor of this motion.
I'm also in favor.
In favor.
I recall this got a very loud yay at the town meeting. That was interesting.
One of my most generous supporters. He was
Yeah.
the first resident at the, in this neighborhood. He was
Got it
quite
very
happy about
excited.
it, too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It
Thank you, sir.
It wasn't me, for the record. Yeah, that's right.
All set.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you all very much.
Let's do 500 Great Pond Road. Where do we stand with this one? Monica?
So, this is for the North Andover Country Club, and it's for their patio fire pit project. As part of their decision required that they submit an as-built plan as well as a letter of certification from their engineer. They have provided both. And now the decision required a vote of the planning board to release the bonds.
Do we have anything from anyone internally, or checking that, or are we all?
I mean, I think it was a smaller thing, but we're sure. All the work was
Everything's
done,
good?
right?
Fire pit up and running?
Everything is up and running. We just need good weather.
Sorry, introduce yourself.
Jeff Isbell, I'm the general manager at North Andover Country Club.
And how was the construction? Everything okay?
Yeah, everything went smoothly. We had the erosion control reports as we were doing it. There were no issues, and things ended up on time. So
I would make a motion to release all remaining bond for, related to the project at North Andover Country Club, 500 Great Pond Road.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Can I just add specific to this project?
Specific to this project,
We
yes,
have
to the fire
outstanding,
pit.
we have outstanding bonds on
Yes,
other
great,
projects.
yes.
You only get your fire pit.
oh, boy, we're so close there.
Yeah.
All right,
I, John Simons, vote yes.
I, Aaron Preston, vote yes.
Jen.
Jennifer Laws, I'm recusing myself because I'm a member of the North Andover Country Club, so I won't vote on this as I didn't vote on the original proposal either.
Okay, we have one recusal. I will vote yes.
Yes?
All right, you have 4-0, and with Jennifer having recused herself. Approved.
Jeff, while you're here, maybe I could just ask you a question?
Yes.
Any progress on the golf balls in the lake?
So we participated in the lake cleanup day back in the fall.
Thank you.
We had 2 boats out collecting over 200 golf balls.
Great.
So we're happy to do our part to participate.
Really appreciate that.
Our
Thank you
pleasure.
so much.
Thank you.
Yep.
So the process is we'll submit something to the treasurer. Don't be surprised, it does take up to a month because we have check runs every other week, so depending on the timing of them receiving it. But we'll submit the memo in the morning.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Anybody have any thoughts about it? We have another discussion. We have a public hearing. We have 2 public hearings, a new one and a continued, as well as the master plan. Anybody have any preferences as to order? Or do we have any timing issues?
Well,
'Cause normally I
I'm
would,
just wondering is if, are you going to be brief, Jeff? Very brief. Yeah, why don't we do that one, and then we can spend more time, on the master plan.
is that 1210 Osgood?
Yeah.
All right, let's do that.
Good evening, Jeff Brown, on behalf of Princeton Development and Forgetta Development. We've been before this board since 2016, approving a mixed-use development at 1210 Osgood Street. Part of that development involved some extensive roadway improvements, traffic signalization. That morphed over time into a quite substantial DOT project as the town was granted a MassWorks grant. So our project became larger from just traffic lighting to sidewalks are now extending all the way down to Butcher Boy, Commerce Way, and north. And so that DOT process has taken a bit longer because of the addition of the sidewalks. And there are land takings involved, very small, so that all the sidewalks are within the right-of-way. So the rest of the site is ready to go. Literally, we are closing on this transaction tomorrow with our construction lender, and we are ready to start construction. But talking with Gene Enright, we discovered a inconsistency, if you will, in the permit itself, in which there's a section that says prior to the issuance of site work, building permit, or construction, it requires us to have our Mass DOT permit, and those would be sections 65 and 66. So working with Gene, we proposed an insubstantial change which would allow us essentially 3 months of site work while we complete the DOT permit process, site work only. We have erosion control and quite a bit to do with wetlands rather than driving bulldozers and clearing grading the site. So we proposed a new condition 65, which would essentially allow up till September 7th to do site work without a Mass DOT permit. If we do not obtain that permit, all site work must cease, and we return the area to a safe grade so that there can be no injury to anyone. And we submitted that both on behalf of Princeton and Forgetta. I know that Eric Gafori got a copy of our letter, our proposal, and tweaked it slightly such that essentially we would continue the same process and have our same 3 months. In his new condition 65, Princeton and Forgetta continue to pay for all the survey and engineering work that goes along with the Mass DOT process. The town will ultimately be the recipient of the Mass DOT permit and conduct these improvements under the Mass Works grant and the Mass DOT permit. So that continues on the same as we had planned in our proposal. Mr. Gafori did add a condition number 66 that said, notwithstanding the fact that, essentially I'm paraphrasing, notwithstanding the fact that Princeton and the town are working together to complete this Mass DOT project, should at some point the town decide to not go forward with this corridor project, that it doesn't relieve Princeton of its obligations to complete the traffic signalization and what we originally presented to this board. We agree with that. We've been working with the town for over a year to get this done, so we don't have any issues with Mr. Gafori's language. I think the only thing I would say about that, and I've spoken to Gene Enright about this, is, you know, if we're well into the process and the town does stop the corridor project for some unimaginable reason, and I highly, highly doubt that would ever occur, you know, we would be in a difficult position to just stop everything and wait for a new DOT permit to issue in our name. So we probably would have to come back before the planning board and address some interim measures that allows us to continue work in some fashion. But absent that comment and the complete unlikely nature that the town wouldn't go forward with the DOT project, and they've worked with us for a year tremendously, those would be our concerns. Otherwise, we fully support Mr. Gafori's letter and would substitute that as the conditions in our permit, as well as the special permit site plan review for Forgetta development.
With Gene and with Eric about this, and I know Eric went over this with town council. Just to be clear on it, on conditions, look, 65 and 66 relate to Forgetta, and I think that should be actually 68 and 69 in Princeton. Is that right?
I think it's the other way around, actually.
The other way. 68 and 69 in Forgetta,
But then they
65 and
suggest-
66
Yeah,
in
but
Princeton.
Forgetta's memo suggests new condition 65, that should be new condition 68.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And then I think on the Forgetta, then Mr. Gafori's 66 would become 69.
Okay. The other thing I would just point out is just that we all kind of think, well, we know what site work means, but in the condition, in the language that Mr. Gafori has written, it does say that for the purpose of this condition, the term site work shall be defined by the town planning department, okay, and in no circumstances shall include any work requiring issuance of a building permit. So just want to make sure that everyone has seen that. I think that's important. I think that at least gives me a lot of peace of mind that this is really going to be site work and that we have the town has some oversight into what that actually means. I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page on that.
Building is what he specifies.
Yeah.
So a retaining wall, which I anticipate being site work, retaining wall does require a building permit if it's over 4 feet. These stormwater structures that are going to be underground. So what I anticipate site work being is installation of all the stormwater underground system, retaining walls, grading, fill.
Correct.
Is there anything other than that?
I don't believe so.
So I do have one question, because we spoke about the community building being a concrete foundation, and that 2 retaining walls will actually be formed as part of that retaining. So that concerns me a little bit in that we wouldn't be allowing any builder permit for that foundation of that structure. So you'd have to think about working around that retaining wall.
Yeah, the reason we picked the 7th of September is we expect to have our building permit application in before that and hopefully issued by September. So I think these are going to dovetail.
Come up at that point.
Fine, and I will report those limited conditions to the general contractor.
I'll also add, for the most part, I've seen the draft DOT permits at the stage that they're at, and everything associated with what was permitted as part of the site plan review in terms of improvements on Osgood Street are still substantially in compliance with what was permitted. There's a couple of minor little differences, but I would definitely deem them insubstantial. So the review for this specific project, I think, is, I would say, 100% intact. The review that's ongoing is those sidewalk extension as part of the Mass Work grants.
I guess to clarify that, when you apply a DEP, you apply in 25% stages, a 25% plan, a 50% plan, 75% plan, and a 100% plan. We have submitted the 100% plan. It's been approved by DOT district. It's now pending before DOT state. The only thing that remains is we had to reconfigure a slight sidewalk area that was going to be near Butcher Boy, and it looks like that's going to extend on the other side of Osgood and head up towards China Blossom. So we've repositioned some of the sidewalk, but the same amount of sidewalk that was anticipated from the beginning is going to be there at the end.
And as far as timing, so Eric spoke with the project engineer, Steve Boudreau, today. He's very optimistic that prior to mid-July, that the permit will actually be in hand. And as Jeff said, the permit's being issued to the town of North Andover. Once that's received, obviously it goes to bids, a bid gets awarded, a contract gets signed. Eric indicated that hopefully shovel would be in ground by the end of August. So we're not that far off the timing of this, although there's some risk, right? So they're going to start site work prior to that.
The thing is, when a project this complex, there's always going to be sort of puts and takes and little things, and I think you're doing a good job of providing, I think, due diligence and scrutiny over the project just to make sure the pieces come together. So I'm perfectly fine with this. I guess I'd ask, what kind of motion is in order here?
So it looks like it's a motion to make this an insubstantial change to the site plan review and multifamily housing introduction and parking special permit, and to modify it with the conditions as set out by, in the memorandum by Mr. Kafori. And I'm also comfortable with it. I think, going to the change in the project in terms of the Mass DOT and the Mass Works grant was not, that was the town's decision, and it's a good one, and it's a great project, and getting a lot of money to do a lot of work, and this happens to be kind of wrapped up into it. I think to the extent we can continue on with this project, which looks like it's going well, and just keep our oversight, we can do it with this.
So I would document this as an insubstantial change, document some findings of facts. I don't know of any conditions other than the September 7th condition, but I would, right. So I'd mimic those and change the language for those, but do it in an official insubstantial change that would be recorded.
Yeah.
I would record it.
I then would make a motion in line with what Etan said, that we accept as an insubstantial change. We accept those 2 conditions as edited by Eric and others and declare victory.
So just to clarify, it's in both permits. It's in our site plan permit, special permit, as well as Forgetta.
Right, so there'd be
Okay.
2 separate insubstantial change
Okay,
documents.
yes, okay.
And
we'll get the condition numbers right in our document.
right, okay, and the findings of fact would detail that the MassWorks grant and the timing, and that's why what will be allowed for, what they'll be doing, what's been described here in terms of site work is what we're relying on, is what's going to be done. Okay, so John's made a motion. Wait a second.
Second.
All in favor, roll call. John.
John Simon, yes?
Aaron Preston, yes.
Unless, yes.
I will vote yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, why don't we go do the public hearings? We'll wait a little bit on the master plan. Let's do new public hearing, 1429 Osgood Street, application for site plan review special permit under sections 8.3, 10.3, 10.31, and 16 of the North Andover zoning bylaw. The applicant proposes exterior and interior renovations to an existing building and seeks a special permit to allow a contractor's yard and outside storage of landscape products located within the Corridor Development District 3, CDD3 zoning district. This is one where they came before us a few months ago with some preliminary ideas and descriptions. It's the building on Osgood Street that you drive by and don't really know it's there. Okay. Monica, why don't you go first? Tell us what you know.
All right, so we have Oliver Enterprise here before us for a site plan review special permit under sections 8.3, 10.3, 10.31, and 16 of the North Andover Bylaw. The applicant proposes exterior, interior renovation to an existing building. They seek a special permit to allow a mixed-use operation, so it'll be a contractor's yard with outside storage. Their landscape material would be located in the outside storage. It would also be office space, and the project is located within the Corridor Development District. This has gone before department review, so police had no concerns, fire had no concerns. Conservation, they were to appear at their last meeting, but they were continued. And health is assessing their sewer plan, so that is still ongoing. Also peer review, they've gone through one round of peer review. We still are awaiting their responses to both stormwater and civil review. So this is just a introduction to their product, and they'll be explaining more.
Okay. All right, so my name's Bridget Souza. I'm with Allen and Major Associates, and we're working with Oliver Enterprises, the owner of the property at 1429 Osgood. So we're here today to just open a discussion with the planning board in order to obtain a special permit to allow a contractor's yard within the CDD3 zoning district. To give you an update as where we stand with the project, we've submitted plans to you as well as conservation, and we began soil testing on site to determine necessary steps for septic. We had received comments back from Horsley Witten and TEC of their peer reviews, but we have yet to respond to the comments. At the owner's request, A&M has paused further work until we have the septic addressed. So the letter I handed out to you was a letter that we sent to the Board of Health today. The test pits on site have shown very shallow groundwater, and some test pits as high as just a foot below surface. Due to this, the septic system would have to be positioned as a mounded system, so it would be roughly 6 feet above existing grade. That would have to be surrounded by retaining walls. So this would be infeasible to the owner as a contractor's yard. They need that space for their business. So due to this is why A&M has submitted the letter to Board of Health. We're requesting the installation of a tight tank instead of a new septic system, as the existing system is not usable. And in the Title V regulations, a tight tank cannot be approved with an increase of flow. If the tight tank is approved, the plans we have submitted to you, as well as conservation and the peer reviewers, would not be valid, as we'd have to shift from the 14,000 square feet of proposed office and remaining as warehouse to what is existing today, which is approximately 1,900 square feet of office remaining as warehouse. It's the sewer would be discharged to the tight tank, and every 20 to 30 days have to be pumped out by an appropriate business.
Okay.
So we're hoping to receive feedback from the board as to what our approach should be in maintaining an open dialogue with the town and going through the process of trying to obtain that approval.
So when are you scheduled to go before the Board of Health?
We have not heard anything back yet. As I said today, today is when we submitted the
Okay.
letter.
Do you have any I know last time you guys were here, you kind of gave us a kind of a thoughts on what the exterior of the building, what the building would look like. Do you guys have
Yes,
any?
we have a set of plans. I passed them into Monica before we came in.
Trying to get them up? All right. So just again, so you're looking for approval from the Board of Health for this tight tank.
Right.
Yes.
How does, if you get it, assuming you get it, how does that change? Does that mean you're going to start these plans again?
Well, we would not require as many parking spaces, so they might be able to either use that space, depending on conservation's input, for more storage, or we might be able to provide a little bit more of a buffer to adjacent wetlands. We would have to take a look at it.
So you're going to really need that answer before we kind of
Yeah.
are in this process.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, my takeaway is this tank gives you less capacity for people in your facility. That's
Correct.
what I'm walking away with.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
One of the stipulations is you can't increase flow. So
Right. Yeah.
that's why we've changed the interior plan of the building and the usage to kind of, because that's how important the outdoor space is to us. You know, impacting, how it impacts the left side on our, say, Plan A would basically cripple the whole access to the site as well, because when you bring in larger vehicles and you're trying to do that turnaround, it's tough with the septic that we have designed now.
So with the program that we had submitted, the 14,000 square feet of office and remaining warehouse, this would be the approximate size of the septic system, with the reserve between the trenches. So this is, tightened up here. They can't put any storage in here like we had originally hoped. It would be, like I said, a 6-foot mounted system.
200 plus on.
Yeah, it's about 200 feet long, approximately.
So not much for us to do today until we hear back from the Board of Health.
As well as completing the.
And then,
Answering the peer reviewers.
but I guess my question is, are the peer reviewers going to have this information about, is what they're responding to still going to apply if you get the tight tank permit?
Some of the comments, after reviewing them, would still apply, but not all of them.
You want to hold off on that until you have a viable septic plan.
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Because you don't want to
That's
just
what I'm
keep going
suggesting.
back and forth.
Right, exactly.
The cost will add up.
Yeah,
Right.
and we've done, several test pits out there with water on top of water. So, we were just trying to come up with something that made sense so we wouldn't have to put that size septic on the left-hand side.
I mean, I think it's good that you realize that there was a problem and are dealing with it now rather
Yeah.
than down the line. I just think it does make sense to hold off on getting answers to peer review questions for things that might not become issues, so, okay. So I think then we should continue this to the next hearing date, which is what is on the 19th. If we don't have anything, I imagine you might not have anything from the Board of Health, we should contact you guys and we'll just continue it out without you having to come in? I mean, is that,
Submit a letter requesting a continuance we would then go to July 17th because of the 4th of July falls
Okay.
on our hearing
Okay.
date, so it would be the.
we're happy to hear you if there's something we can do, but if we're not
Right.
gonna do anything,
Yeah.
continue it so we can actually accomplish something.
No, I
Come
was
back.
just throwing a major wrench into things, but, it is what it is. Can I ask a question? Has there been any discussion about running the sewer line further down Osgood Street?
That's what I was gonna say to you, it sounds like we'd be better off if that were the
Right.
case, but it's contingent on, basically people, picking up the pro rata share of it. I mean, it's,
Well, I'm willing.
yeah.
That's a question for Public Works and for
Yeah.
managers. so,
Yeah. Well, it doesn't seem like it's, we've asked questions, and where the sewer line is now, we'd have to pump, and it's all the way up towards the sushi restaurant, so that's quite a ways.
Right,
And that's a DOT road, so the application process is,
Yeah.
yeah.
okay,
Extensive.
All right,
thank you.
all right,
Appreciate it,
thanks.
thank you.
All right, so let's go to continued public hearing for 35 Dale Street. Moving right along.
He's completed the second round of peer review. The first round of peer review recommended rotating a pool to reduce the need for tree removal, reducing the amount of regrading required. This peer review stated in the second round that if the applicant chose to maintain the current proposed orientation, the appropriate grading should be incorporated to ensure that the finished ground slopes are shallower than a 1B, 2H. And he added this should be included in the decision. He also said that a filter system must be located along the northern and western side of the pool, maximizing separation of the resource areas. He also, in an effort to try and maintain a tree cover, recommended that trees be pruned rather than removed. So that's a determination, of course, the board would have to make. And so Jay is before us, kind of to talk about these remaining issues. Also, just to let you know, this is still open with conservation. It's been through ZBA, and we could provide an update.
Jay Henshaw, Project Manager, Gibraltar Pools. As far as the grading or rotating the pool slightly, I didn't have an issue with rotating the pool. It does mean that we cut a little longer, about a foot more onto the side. His response to my saying that would increase it was he thinks that it would eliminate the possibility of a gullying sort of thing, so I have no problem moving that pool as long as I don't have to revise the plan. We just have to turn one corner of the pool slightly. If we have to revise the plan, it's going to be expensive. So in that case, then I'd stay with the grading he suggested. The second, the tree pruning. Most of these trees aren't the healthiest trees going, and so they're only really, most of them are only flowered or leafed high up. So if we prune these back, we're pruning very high, and it's just going to leave it all bare anyway. I did take some pictures today, so you guys could see the condition of these trees. It's not a healthy wood. If you want to take a look at these. Some shots of the yard here. Give you some idea what kind of condition the area is in. And with the trees being leafed so high, if we try to prune it, it's going to be bare. Now, conservation left it open. They basically approved the plan that we have, but they left it open depending on if you guys make any changes. I don't have to redo the whole process again. So if you don't make any changes, they will close it next week. The ZBA granted the variance.
Do we have that decision?
I have a copy of it if you need it. Pardon my photography. It was raining, and that's a poison ivy field now.
No, photography's fine.
I was tiptoeing around in there.
Or flipping.
Yeah, it's also disheveled. But it gives you an idea of the amount of wood that's dropping and the trees with, the dead bark and that sort of thing. It's not as if we're going into a really healthy wood and devastating it by any means. We're looking most likely to take out the hurting trees, but some of the good trees that remain are in the middle of the project, so they would have to come out.
So you said if, I'm looking at the comments, and I appreciate that it looks like you really did work with the peer reviewer on this. It says under number 1, if the applicant chooses to maintain the current proposed orientation, then appropriate grading should be incorporated to ensure that finished ground slopes are shallower than 1V:2H. So you're comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, is there any public members? I don't see anyone from the public that I would think has an in. Okay. Anybody have thoughts on this? I was a little skeptical when you were here the first time, but I think I'm glad to see the comments from the peer review have been addressed. My thought would be go with the, leave it as is and put in the grading condition.
Sure.
In terms of tree removal, tree pruning. I mean, I've driven by there a bunch. I agree, they're not the great trees. They're not providing shade for anyone. I don't think they're really impacting anyone outside of the property owners. I'm really comfortable with whatever conservation was comfortable with in terms of keeping the saplings and then removing as described in the plan. So I don't know if anyone else has strong opinions on that. Let me ask, Monica, where are we in terms of if we want to vote and make a decision?
We would have to have a decision for the next meeting. I've not prepared a draft one, but I can include the regrading as a condition, as well as, let's see, the peer review also noted that we should add a condition related to the filter system, which was his comment number 3.
The location of the filter?
Right.
Yeah, I have no issues with that at all.
Okay.
3B.
Okay, so we want to add those, and
He provided a new certification for the downgrading that was signed and stamped by a professional engineer.
okay, great.
So it's the same letter as before, except signed and taken care of by their engineer rather than the surveyor.
Okay, so yeah, if you want to, I mean,
Yeah,
any issues,
I'm
anybody?
perfectly fine. I agree with you. I mean, I'm a tree hugger, but there's scrub trees out there.
Right. So why don't we draft a decision that incorporates those conditions, and if we think of anything else, we can address it then, but it seems like you've done what you need to do. So we'll come back in 2 weeks, and we'll have that draft decision, and we'll vote on it then.
So it'll be the 19th. So it'll be the 19th.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
We don't have a decision drafted for
I get
for
it.
today.
The issue, I'm just trying to put the timeline together here, trying to get this thing in before September, but gotta do what we have to do. All right, well, guys, this is how we have to do it.
All right, so
One question I would have, the tree work, is it possible to start on that before the decision is written?
do you really want an answer to that?
I know, but I want a good answer, not yours.
Technically, I don't think you can do anything until the decision is written.
That's what I figured. I'm sorry, what's that?
There's an appeal period as well.
I understand that, that's why I
For
was,
both conservation and us, but
Yeah.
theirs is only 10 days, I believe, ours is 20.
yeah,
Their hearing is a week later than us, so I think that might all line up, but.
yeah, but the appeals period doesn't start till after the decision's written.
And filed, right?
And filed with the clerk.
Right. So,
I'm trying to calculate the timeline here, so we're looking at August. All right.
all right, thank you very much.
Thank
We'll
you.
continue until the next meeting. We'll decide then. Great. All right. Let's do RKG Associates, present draft master plan. Eric, you're up.
Is there control here for the? Did I just tell you when it changed? Okay. Hi.
Hi.
How you doing? Good to see you again. So tonight is the kickoff, I think, of the planning board. Yeah, that's right. Somebody said to me the other day, "Oh, where are you?" I was talking to my dad on the way up. He said, "Oh, where are you with the project process?" And I said, "I think we're at the beginning of the end." He said, oh, "Okay." So this is the kind of the kickoff overview presentation for you all as well as the public who's hopefully watching or will watch. So I hope to just give maybe a 10 or 15 minute recap on the master plan, talk a little bit about where we are right now, where I hope we're going to head between now and I think beginning to mid of August, depending on how you want to handle the public hearing and approval process, and hopefully we can get to approval in August. If it's okay with you, I'll run through the presentation.
Yeah, I'd say, so why don't you go through your presentation, and then I think we should maybe just have a kind of short discussion ourselves about how we'd like to, I mean, ultimately, we're going to be voting to approve this, so it's, you know, a 220-page document, so how we're gonna go about, you know, going through that and making suggestions or changes or comments, and then being able to air those out and discuss them in a meaningful way is something I'd like to discuss because it's a challenge. So.
Could we also have an opportunity to hear from members of the committee?
Sure. Anyone who wants to anyone who wants to say anything can feel free. Have at it.
Perfect. Okay. So just a quick recap. So we had a number of members who I think if you had been to the public meetings or.
A little bit, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Sure. Sure.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Much.
Okay, great. Sorry. So a couple of members of our team, just wanted to sort of reintroduce them. So myself, Eric Halverson is the project manager. We also had Jen Goldson, Jeff Donahoe, Daphne Politis, and Judy Barrett, who you probably saw all of them throughout the process. All made up the RKG team. So just really quickly to recap, what is a master plan? In general, it's really a plan for the community's sort of physical evolution. In the case of North Andover, we've been talking with staff in the committee, I think with you as well. This would be about a 10 or 15 year time horizon for the plan. And it's really comprehensive analysis of all the different elements that kind of make up what we would consider community development. And it's really it's sort of a higher level public policy document that's going to hopefully guide the future changes across the town over the next 10 to 15 years. There's 7 elements throughout the plan: land use, housing, transportation, economic development, public facilities and services, natural, cultural resources, open space, and recreation. So those are the 7 elements. At the end of the plan, you'll also see a implementation chapter, which includes the implementation table as well. So we really, throughout the process, from the beginning to the end, have been asking questions of the planning board, of the community, of the master plan committee, and many others along the way. You know, where does the community want to go over the next 10 to 15 years? Where's the community today? Much of that 200 and some odd page document, you and everyone else have seen probably 90% of it, I would say, leading up to the release of the draft, because a lot of it was that existing conditions, the vision and goals that have been out there for a couple months, as well as the implementation that we went over with you all and the public back in March at that public meeting. So really what's new in the draft document is kind of the introductory section, which is maybe 10 or 15 pages, the implementation table, and then some kind of text that sort of brings everything together. But anyway, so also looking at where are we going, how might the community change over time, and sort of how will we get from where we are today to where we want to go in the future. In terms of the project schedule, we're a touch behind, I think, where we wanted to be. We want to wrap this up in about a year. This will be about 14 months, I think, hopefully, fingers crossed, when we're all done. Started last June, and here we are in June now, kind of kicking off the end here. But we've gone through a lengthy process that included a lot of public involvement, I think, at all levels, both sort of one-on-one interviews all the way up to a couple hundred people attending public meetings along the way. Next. So just a little bit about the public engagement process. We had monthly, if not twice a month, meetings of the Master Plan Advisory Committee, who I think I've mentioned a couple times has been extremely helpful along the way, providing critical guidance to us, as well as having town staff sit around that table. Gene and Eric have been awesome the whole way through. Two big, really well-attended Master Plan public forums. The last one was in March. I know many of you were at. We had focus group discussions and interviews along the way from beginning to end. Planning board updates with the Board of Selectmen along the way, and also an online presence that Gene and staff have been managing, the town's webpage for the project and for the committee, Facebook postings, online surveys, email blasts, you name it. Tried a lot of different ways to get people involved, and I think we were pretty successful. So just in terms of some of the newer material that you'll find toward the beginning of the master plan document. So the vision statement, I think I may have mentioned this the last time I was with you. The consultant team took a crack at coming up with a vision statement based on the feedback that we got at the first public meeting. We took all that feedback from the public and crafted a vision statement, presented it to the master plan advisory committee and staff. Then they took it from there and really owned it and made it their own and tried to make it as North Andover as possible. It's interesting, some of the feedback that we got on some of our original vision statement work was that it wasn't enough sort of North Andover specific. So the committee and Gene and Eric took another crack at it over the last month or so, and I think came up with something that's a little bit more specific and hopefully responds to some of the public feedback that we got coming out of that March meeting. But just in general, I won't read all the bullets on the left, but really creating kind of that welcoming community where businesses can thrive, everybody can live, and sort of preserves and respects the environment, the open spaces, and the assets that make North Andover the place that it is today. Within each of the 7 master plan elements, so land use, transportation, et cetera, could you go up, Monica, real quick? Sorry. The goals and the recommendations, there's 25 goals, and there's about 100 recommendations. They're all organized by those elements. You'll see them structured in the document as well as in the implementation table that way. As I mentioned, the plan covers about a 10 to 15 year time frame. One thing that when I met with the advisory committee last month, or maybe the month before, I can't remember now when it was, they had great feedback on the draft plan. They saw it first, made a lot of comments to the consultant team. We revised it, so what you see and what the public is seeing now as the draft has sort of gone through one revision with staff comments as well as the committee. There were maybe 2 or 3 kind of larger item changes I wasn't able to get in with the round of comments or the draft plan that you all have now. A couple of them came from Gene. I think they're excellent suggestions. I just ran out of time to get it in your hands in time before this meeting, so you had a chance to start looking at it. But one of the suggestions that Gene had, which I think is really a good one, is right now all of the implementation recommendations are organized by the chapter headings, land use, transportation, et cetera. Gene was saying that it would be helpful to take all those and maybe organize them by theme. So, for example, there are recommendations that are across all those 7 chapters that probably relate to downtown, for example, or connectivity as a theme. So could we organize the recommendations by theme? So there might be, in the end document, there might be 2 implementation tables. One, if you want to look at what are all the land use recommendations or transportation, you'll be able to see that. But if from a staff perspective, if you're trying to figure out what are the recommendations to improve or enhance downtown, we could organize it by downtown, and then staff and the planning board and the board of selectmen, whoever is going to be responsible for those recommendations, could kind of look at downtown more holistically and try to put together all the different things that need to happen. So we're going to work on that, and there were a couple of other suggestions that the committee had that we're going to work on to try to get that with the next iteration of the draft plan. So given that there's 25 goals, 7 chapters, 100 recommendations, it's a lot to absorb and distill, but I tried my best in the introduction to try to bring them together in some fashion. So when I was reading through them all and looking at them again, kind of five, at least I thought five major themes kind of stood out. These were things I think that our team and the committee has heard from beginning to end, and I'll just quickly go through these to wrap up the presentation. But I think in general, they're sort of improving the downtown experience, connecting people and places, making housing affordable and available and accessible, preserving and protecting those natural assets, and incentivizing opportunities around town for reinvestment. So I have a little bit of just kind of what those are in the preceding slides. So around improving the downtown experience, you know, it's not just one thing. I think it's going to be a whole host of different recommendations that will come together to help enhance downtown. And I think that starts with sort of revisiting the downtown zoning, trying to align the zoning with where the downtown wants to go, and I think maybe where the market is thinking downtown might head. So that may be the inclusion of a mixed use and maybe housing elements in the downtown, coupled with infrastructure improvements, so consistent streetscape, improvements to the sidewalk, safer crossings. We heard about bike facilities, and not necessarily just sort of bike lanes or share the road signs, but bike racks, places for people to actually just park bikes. Those don't really exist in downtown. Thinking about ways to expand historic, cultural, or community events. I know the farmers market's down there now, but are there other ways to integrate other events and kind of focus them in the downtown to draw people from all over North Andover to the downtown? I know when we heard from folks who are living further out in out country, they don't necessarily, or at least some of them, what we heard, don't necessarily think about traveling to downtown. So are there ways to draw them in? Because as you get further out, there's not as many activity centers out that way, especially kind of commercial activity centers. So bringing them into the downtown. So those are some ideas that we had under that theme. These are obviously all spelled out in much more detail in the actual master plan itself. This theme about connecting people and places. So again, we heard particularly people who live further out from, I think, where we are right now, connectivity to activity centers, transportation connections, not only driving, but bike, transit, and sidewalks in particular. I would say sidewalks might have been one of the biggest themes coming out of this, maybe other than downtown. So are there ways the town can start to prioritize filling in the gaps in the sidewalk network around town, and trying to prioritize linkages between where people live, maybe where people work, recreation opportunities or places, open spaces, schools was a big one. So trying to think about connecting the places where people live, work, and actually want to go to either visit or recreate. There's a lot of trails and open spaces in North Andover. I think it's one of the things that makes the town unique and special. People really appreciate that. So trying to figure out ways to better connect them, whether it be through trail networks, safe street crossings, signage, marketing, whatever it is. Opportunities to incorporate bike infrastructure so people can bike, I think, more safely around town. And then finding ways to reduce vehicular congestion, particularly on some of the major commercial corridors, was a big theme too. Heard a lot about housing. I think the last time I was here, we talked a little bit about housing and how, you know, I think there are a lot of people who agree that more housing choice is good, and that doing that at a variety of price points is good. So we've tried to build recommendations that that try to accomplish that, but not say North Andover needs to build so much housing that it completely changes the character of the town. So we're trying to balance those two things. So hopefully you'll see that in the recommendations. Trying to encourage housing in select locations where the town thinks it makes sense. Using housing as kind of a catalyst for redevelopment sites. A lot of new development that's taking place is a mixture of uses, whether it's vertically oriented mixed use or horizontally oriented mixed use. Similar to the project I think you were hearing about tonight on Osgood Street. Adopting inclusionary zoning, I think, is important, especially as more larger scale housing projects seem to be coming into the town or before the planning board. Having a set aside for at least some percentage of affordable housing, so there's a mix of incomes in a housing development. That'll help you with the 40B thresholds and your 10% threshold, but it'll also help to keep the people who are here in housing that they can afford as housing prices continue to rise. We also looked at updating the planned residential development bylaw and making it fit with kind of the size parcels that the town might have left, where that might actually be applicable. So those are some of the recommendations we had around housing. Next one. Preserving and protecting natural assets. The town just recently did the open space plan, so following up on that, a lot of our recommendations were coming out of that so that there was consistency there. I know we talked about re-examining the watershed protection district bylaw. Does that still make sense? It's been 30 years, I think, since that was put in place in '87. Yeah. And then expanding recreation opportunities around town, both on land and potentially on water, and finding ways to expand recreation opportunities for folks of all ages. I think the new project that's happening over near the middle school is a really great example of that. And the last one is just looking at opportunities for reinvestment. As a town the town's sort of been, I think, been building outward for a while, and now it seems, at least from an outsider's perspective, that there's now infill development that's coming before you, as well as redevelopment opportunities in certain parts of town. So figuring out ways to concentrate development, I think, in those locations where it makes sense, thinking about a mix of uses that includes commercial as well as residential, and kind of thinking about some of those key corridors, 114, 125, Osgood Street, as maybe some of those catalytic corridors where more development could happen because the infrastructure's there, while preserving open space and I think the natural assets that make North Andover a special place elsewhere in town. So those were kind of the 5 big themes. I think as we look at this sort of reorganized implementation table, we'll think about those themes and see which other ones come out as well. So that's my really high-level distillation of the 200-page document.
Question I have, in terms of our role and how we get to a final master plan, how have you seen other communities vote on the master plan? To break that down, have you seen them just vote on the plan as presented, or vote more like a budget kind of recommendation by recommendation, goal by goal? Because it seems to me that if we can, I'd like to get into some of these specific recommendations and goals, and if the majority of the board supports, say one goal that says, create more open space, okay, great, then that stays. But if, and one says create an inclusionary zoning bylaw, if the majority of the board doesn't really feel that that's appropriate for the master plan, then I don't think it should be in. Doesn't mean you can't do it later on, but it seems to me we really do want to get into those specific recommendations, because like how we are right now, that all that data is, that it is what it is, that's the data. The themes, they seem like these are really good themes. The high level stuff seems kind of, it makes sense to get on board, but when you get to the specific recommendations, I think especially the ones that are more specific about change zoning, adopt bylaws, stuff like that, we really should have a discussion and see if the majority of the board supports those. And so I'm just wondering, how have you seen people kind of discuss and vote and finish off this process as a planning board?
Yep. So I would say in terms of the whole plan, I think it would be best in the long, at the end, to adopt the plan as a whole,
right,
as the planning board. I think as we go through the review process, so I've provided the comment matrix, which I think you all have seen during the existing conditions chapters. It'd be helpful for me, at least, as the person who's going to receive that feedback and then got to figure out what to do with it before I come before you again. It'd be really helpful for you to flag the things that you want to talk about, and then I could maybe combine them and work with staff to figure out how many we can tackle in an evening, or go chapter by chapter, or element by element, and then talk about those.
So my thought was we could even, so there are 7 sections, right? Maybe, so when we have 3 public hearings, or 2 public hearings scheduled, we have 2 public hearings scheduled. Maybe we could do the first I mean, if the public wants to come and talk, I think they should be able to talk about whatever they want. Anyone who comes can speak of whatever they want, but maybe we should try to do the first three on that first night and just be focused on those and try to come prepared to discuss specific goals and recommendations within the first three, and then we'll do the last four on the second night. That way we've broken it up, and you know, and if more topics come up, so be it. That was just kind of my thought on how we could kind of tackle them, because I would like to get at least into a small discussion as to certain ones. We don't have, you know, again, I'm just, inclusionary zoning was one, you know, and I'm familiar with that. I think it's a good idea. I don't think if we like the idea, I don't think we need to have a specific bylaw in mind, but we can just say we like the idea, or, you know, we're not sold on the idea. We don't need to include it, but someone can, you know, come up with it later on if they want. So, and I think we should try to do that as much as we can for each of the different goals specifically. And then if there's other language that people aren't happy with in the vision statement, to me, that's not as important personally, but if other people are more interested in some of the overarching principles and how the document wants to define itself, then, you know, have at it. But, but comments, anyone have thoughts on?
Well, for me going forward in the public hearing process, I'd like to hear more about how the plan becomes actionable and measurable. So when we adopt this plan, how do we take that and actually act upon it, and over time see how we're doing, and measure where we are and figure out how we need to maybe tweak our actions as a town to act on the plan, because that's what we want this. We want this to be not something that just read and say, oh, that's nice, we should get there someday. We want something that's implementable. And I'm not sure from what your interactions with the town, whether that's something that you and the Master Plan Advisory Committee works on, or is that's maybe the next stage after we adopt the master plan, is that others come together to figure out, okay, what are the real actionable steps that we have to take here.
So I know there has been, I think at least with amongst the town personnel, and I know some of the Board of Selectmen, some discussion about, you know, should there be an implementation committee, or should there be people really kind of designated to try to facilitate that. Now, ultimately, a lot of these things will come down to, you know, planning board bylaws, Board of Selectmen bylaws, financial constraints, town budgets, all of that. But I think you're very much right that we don't want this to be a document that we celebrate and hold up and then it sits on a shelf for 15 years, because I've seen that in other places. We do, and maybe when we do adopt it, that we should vote on something, or at least have some suggestions in mind for how to go about leading some implementation. I think that's as important, if not more important. Yeah.
Really good idea. In some of the areas, it's going to be the primary way we move forward. I mean, stuff related to zoning and some of the economic development are going to come through other means, but, you know, things like connectivity, that's going to rely a lot on individual initiative and good ideas that spring up from people. So to have a standing group of people or something that helps facilitate that, I think is really going to be important. And then in an overall sense, stepping back and seeing if we're making progress and whether we have to make adjustments, I think makes a lot of sense.
Is there any, following up on Aaron's, do you have any suggestions for measurables, you know, in terms of, you know, we're talking about connectivity and trails and sidewalks and stuff like that. Do you have suggested ways where we would look and see if we've made improvements on those kind of things?
So
not necessarily right now, but I'm just saying, is there something some suggestions we could get?
Yeah, I mean, on that, it depends. If you are looking for, you know, percentage of this or percentage of that, or setting targets, I would say I don't personally feel comfortable doing that, because if you set those targets and you make some progress, I still think that's better than making no progress. So I think leaving the implementation recommendations as they're written is probably good, at least at the master plan level. We had discussions at the last committee meeting, and I wish Eric was here, because he can probably speak to this better than I can, but I know he's had some discussions with the town manager about this whole implementation idea after the master plan is adopted, how does this live on? And I think at least the two of them were talking about almost putting this into something similar to a Gantt chart, like some kind of format like that where you could actually track the recommendations, who's responsible, and then year over year, sort of looking back as town departments are trying to set goals for the new year or looking at their budgets. Because I believe each department's responsible for doing like a small write-up as part of the budget. So you could easily work in master plan goals and implementation into that process. And I'm not sure if the boards and committees in North Andover do goal setting at the beginning of the year, but that's also another opportunity to look back at the master plan and say, okay, we're within the 1 to 4 year time band of the master plan. What are the recommendations that relate to the planning board, for example? Which ones do we want to try to take on, or which ones do we want to work with staff or the implementation committee on, or whoever the responsible party or partners might be? So I would almost say it would be good to do the goal setting at the beginning of the year, and then at the end of the year, look at what did we actually do or make progress on and use that as a way to measure, rather than saying, we wanted to construct 2 miles of sidewalk, we didn't do that this year. But you could say, we filled this critical gap between this residential subdivision and school X, that's some progress. Next year, we're going to try and fill this gap and this gap, or, try to keep it a little bit higher level in terms of the tracking. But I do agree. I think the implementation committee is really important because you guys are obviously very busy. And you have work other than master plan implementation to do when you meet. Staff is also really busy with their day-to-day duties and jobs. So having kind of that standalone committee that can sort of serve as a liaison, and maybe that committee is made up of someone who knows a lot about transportation, so they can kind of work on that with, say, DPW and someone else. Someone who knows a lot about conservation could work with the conservation committee and staff. So you can almost formulate the implementation committee with people who may have specialties.
I don't think it's about us being busy or anything. It's about bringing different competencies to the table. To Etan's point earlier about you got to manage the implementation with resources, a budget, and often those things have to be voted in town meeting.
Yep.
So there are certainly constraints, and I think an implementation group would go a long way to recognizing those constraints and trying to release them, say in a town meeting, or preparing to get those removed so that things can be implemented.
Absolutely. Yep. And they can also stand up at town meeting and speak on behalf of master plan initiatives and things like that too.
Okay. Any members of the public have anything they want to say? No? Okay. Anybody else? Peter?
I think there's some committee members here.
Totally agree with what Eric said, and you're asking good questions. We too were concerned about the implementation and how that works out, and that's critical. So, to be determined.
And thanks for all the work of the committee.
It was enjoyable, quite a learning experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, Eric, you guys have done a great job. I think the committee has done a really great job. And it's hard to take something that is so broad and with so many different opinions on a lot of different things and put it into something where we do have a good vision, a general vision, but also some really good specific suggestions. So, I mean, I think you've given us a lot to work with, so it's
Good.
very much appreciated.
Good.
I got a couple of questions for her. This is I guess made the mistake of printing this out. The good news is it was double-sided. The bad news is this was a long document. Do you happen to know how much the document grew in number of pages from the previous version?
From the 2000 plan?
Yeah.
I don't, but I have the 2000 plan. I could look at it.
Yeah. I don't know the number of pages in the 2000, but I looked at the 2000, and it strikes me that this is larger by not a small amount. It's pretty significantly longer. What's the reason for that?
personally, when I read this, well, not read, but when we wrote this plan and looked, and then I looked back at the 2000, I think this one is quite a bit more detailed.
Yeah.
And I think it includes a lot more goals and recommendations and with more specificity than I think the 2000 plan had.
From what I've heard, the public input piece of it was a lot more this time than last time. So that's, I wasn't here for that one, but I've heard that.
Yeah. So my second question is that, and I asked this about a year ago,
Our website.
and now that you've been through it here, I just want to re-ask the question. The purpose of the master plan in your beginning slide is comprehensive analysis of all elements, ... And the question I had asked a year ago is why isn't public health included in a master plan? And I wonder if you have any more thoughts to share on that. I mean, it seems to me that it's a really critical aspect of a town and the residents, and it just continues to strike me as odd. And sort of the answer I got last time was, well, we haven't done that before. And I don't know if there's a better answer to that.
I think the easy answer is it's not required by state law, so most communities don't think to include it. I think as an element when they're seeking consultants, or they're doing them in-house, whichever they choose to do.
Yeah.
I am aware, just through looking at other RFPs, over the last couple of years, there are a couple of communities that have paid extra or put extra money to include additional elements, public health being one of those. I'm trying to think, I think Wellesley just redid what they're calling kind of a strategic plan. It's sort of a hybrid plan. So they actually contracted with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council to do a public health element. I want to say Concord, in their recent master plan that I think is getting ready to finish up pretty soon, did the same thing. So there are towns that are doing that. And I think when you look at the American Planning Association guidelines, they have kind of, I forget what they call them. They sort of call them like planning elements, but they don't follow the traditional land use. They're not sort of these buckets. They're more systems rather than individual kind of siloed chapters. And I think that they incorporate public health. They've sort of realized that it's an important element. To be honest, we sort of responded to what we thought the town wanted at the time, and so we put together this master plan. But I agree with you, and I think as the aging population continues to grow and environmental changes continue to occur, not only here but around the world, that hopefully that will become a more regular element of community planning.
Well, I appreciate your perspective.
Peter, do you have any specific concerns within public health is a broad topic? Did you have any specific concerns that you thought you'd like to see at least investigated as part of the master plan?
Well, I think it's late in the process. I mean, it's
far along. I guess I'm more curious than anything else what your thoughts are.
Well, I think if we sort of look around us, sort of where we are as a region and a country and a community, we've got a number of indicators that would suggest that it's something we need to pay attention to, and not that we don't. I mean, we've got a terrific public health board and all doing a great job, but you look at the addiction crisis that's affecting communities, right? The family, neighborhood, community level. So that's a public health issue. I mean, it's law enforcement, but it's also public health, right? You look at examples that we've seen, the most public one in this area is Flint, Michigan, but certainly not the only community that has had issues with, a major impact on public health, which is the water we drink every day. And there, I think, the town has done a great job, invested in a water treatment plant, and 20 years ago, the zoning bylaws for the watershed to protect, and recent activities to preserve space along the lake, to conserve it, to protect the watershed. So I think there's a lot of great things we're doing. But it's still an area that deserves our attention, because you're okay as long as all the great things are done, and we're doing a lot of great things, but you're not okay if that's not done. And it affects absolutely everybody in the town in ways that are short-term and long-term, lifelong issues. You know, and things like, you know, we've got facilities in town that, you know, a big incinerator plant that I think was very carefully implemented in this town in terms of monitoring what happens in that incineration in terms of not only the air quality with the prevailing winds that come across the town, but also with rainfall, what comes out of that and onto the ground. And I think the town's done a great job with that. And it's worth continued attention. And these are all issues that, you know, I think do affect the community in dramatic ways. And I think the town has done a fantastic job and something we ought to be continuing to emphasize to continue. So those are just several sort of off the top of my head examples of why it's such a very important issue. And when we talk about a comprehensive analysis of all elements, I mean, I think that's pretty close to a quote. It continues to just make me wonder, and I think you've got a great answer. What does the state require? I really think that's a spot-on answer, but you know, for me, coming through this process, one of my takeaways is it's a question I asked early on, and I'm still, you know, if anything, it's sharpened the question. You know, unfortunately, we may have to wait 20 years to do anything about it.
Not necessarily. I mean, I think it's a good question, but it's something that, even if it doesn't make it into this master plan, it's something that we can still continue to at least think about as a planning board what we can do, right? I mean, are there ways through zoning that we can either encourage the appropriate, you know, addiction or mental health counseling or things like that? You know, if we're paying attention to open space because we want, you know, places that people can go to be healthy, we should also, you know, places where seniors, I mean, we talk about senior housing, but we should also talk about, you know, seniors leading, you know, healthy, fruitful lives, and part of that, that's certainly a health issue. And can we do anything, or what can we do as a planning board? So maybe that's something that, if not as part of this, we, you know, have a separate subcommittee to kind of think about and see what we can do.
You know, another example is through, over the last year, you know, you may recall that we had a proposal about marijuana cultivation.
We did?
Yeah, I don't know if, yes, you might not have been here for that meeting. And one of the things that came out of that, just in terms of sort of our self-governance here, you know, and how we care and look, you know, out for the town, is we engaged the Public Health Board. And at least for me, that was, I thought, enormously helpful for this board to say, look, we're not the expert in everything, but there is a board here that focuses on public health. We should ask them, what's your view? And I thought that was a terrific exercise. Now, if someone on the, you know, the Public Health Board is interested in the master plan, well, they're not responsible for that. We are. But it's that sort of exercise, you know, as a planning board, reaching out to those other boards that have the expertise. And, you know, the master plan's probably an area that maybe we could have done a little more there, reaching out to those other boards and, hey, what have you got for this? So just another example over the course of the year that has, you know, made an impression on me. And you know, even, you know, with the drinking water example, and again, I'm not suggesting there's a problem. I think the town does an absolutely great job. But we say throughout many town documents, including on the webpage, that, you know, the lake, which is the sole source of drinking water, that it's our greatest asset. But a lot of times in the way we talk about the lake, it's an asset in many ways. It's a historic asset, it's a recreational asset, it's a drinking water asset, and other areas. I think we tend in our discourse to kind of refer to it as, you know, it's, I mean, John, you use the term that, you know, you're a tree hugger, and a lot of people, you know, environmentalists talk about it that way. But for me, it's also a huge public health asset. And I think that the master plan could have been a place where we changed that reference a little bit. It's not just a pretty thing. It's an asset worth money. And if we take care of it, we save money. And if we don't take care of it, we cause the town to spend money. And that happened in the 80s, having to build the water treatment plant.
But I think you raised an important point, because natural resources, particularly where are going to be increasingly important over the next 50, 100 years, if not the single most important thing of all.
Yeah.
I think the stewardship has been good, and one of the measures of that is the fact that our water rates have not increased over the last 5 or 6 years, which is not solely a measure of something, but it says something that we haven't had to do any of these really emergency kinds of things where we've had to make major expenditures to correct problems, that it manages itself pretty well.
Right.
But I think you're right that we ought to continue to focus on it. And I never really thought that the master plan, I always thought it was a framework, and that all these other things we layer on in terms of ongoing processes is all ways to move it forward. I don't think they're at odds with it. I mean, I think there's, you got to be careful that you don't become all things to all people, which is always a little bit of a risk. You got to pick something that you're going to concentrate on, but there's no. If you have a good process, you should be able to get other things done too. Yeah.
I think we'll wrap up. Going back to the Board of Health coming, I mean, I think we have been focused on the master plan for a while, and I think we need to finish this up, wrap this up, get it done in August. But I do kind of like the idea of trying to get other people with knowledge, Board of Health, or even police and fire, or DPW, just getting some more input kind of on a more regular basis, to have someone come talk about what's going on at the lake, at different meetings throughout the year, just to give ourselves some more basis of knowledge.
We've talked about collaboration among all the land use boards, and I'm probably more guilty than anybody, having had the tenure, but we don't always engage directly as well with conservation and zoning as much as we should, and maybe we should have a couple of workshops every year with those groups.
So, something to look forward to after we finish the master plan. Okay, so with that being said, so what we'll do is we will have the first public hearing on June 19th. Is that right? Okay, and
Notice today in the paper, so it opens on the 19th, and it's only open for the 19th. However, you guys indicated you want at least 2, and based on turnout and input at 2, you may go 3.
Okay.
So I plan on tomorrow posting this on the website, along with the legal notice indicating that it's going to open on the 19th, but I'll indicate it will continue to the July 17th meeting.
Okay.
So everybody's aware, in case they're not here for the 19th, they'll have another opportunity. I posted it in hard copy at the library, the senior center, clerk's office, and planning office today. So again, tomorrow when I post it online, I'll let everybody know if they need to see it in hard copy, they can stop at any of those facilities to see it. So the word's going to be get the word out on the public hearing. So any of your networks that you can let everybody know that it's out, it's online, it's in hard copy, and any input that they want to provide, they should attend that meeting.
Okay, and so what we'll try to do is members of the public who come and want to give any input or ask any questions about the master plan are encouraged to come in on that June 19th. For us members of the board, we can talk about anything, but I'd like to focus on the first 3 sections. That way we have a little bit easier time trying to get into some of the details on that. Okay. So till the 19th for the master plan.
Should I expect any comments from the board prior to the opening of the public hearing? Just so I.
Well,
you
said you're going to send some revisions, another draft, right? There was some stuff that you hadn't got into this draft.
It was only the major themes that you hadn't included in this draft.
Right. So it was that sort of reworked implementation table.
Just tie in the implementation table to the specific page and goal number in each chapter. So it was really fine-tuning things as opposed to changing context.
Yep. The content won't change. It's just adding some things. I think that maybe make the document a little easier to navigate.
So, I mean, if people want to, but I mean, to me, it seems like we should hear from the public and have a discussion about those items. And if, a majority of the board kind of says, hey, we don't like something or we want to change something, then we'll change it. But otherwise, I'm not I'm not sure that it's necessary to have individual comments to you or to have you change anything pending the discussion. It seems we should have the discussion, and if things need to be changed, then we'll change them then.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't change it before I wouldn't change it before the public hearing.
So if anyone has any questions, I'd say reach out, about any particular items, certainly reach out to Eric or reach out to Jean, or,
Yeah.
and they can ask specific questions, but if we flag something that we want to debate, we can let you know, or we can just look to discuss it that day.
Yeah.
But to Eric's point, we've seen 90% of it already.
I agree.
So
To me, it's mostly.
There's not much new there.
To me, it's mostly about the goals and the specific goals and recommendations, and if we like them or don't like them, and if we have suggested changes to them. Yeah, I don't think it's about the data,
Makes sense.
The supplemental material, so putting in that column that references back to the goal number, just do that as a supplement material so that I can post it along with the draft.
Okay.
When you get to those points.
Yep.
And again, the one that I had suggested, that doesn't necessarily have to be part of that. It's really, I think, a great tool for the implementation strategy. So I don't know that it's necessarily part of the document itself.
Yep, okay, great. And just one last quick comment. The document that you have is a Word-based document, and it is bare bones. I do that because if I have to adjust content, it's a lot easier to do it in editing in Word. The final version of the master plan, we have the intention of moving it into a much more published, professional-looking document with photos and color and cleaner text and more organization. The content will remain exactly the same as whatever comes out of the public hearing and the comments and the changes that we make on behalf of the board and the town. But the actual document itself will look a lot different than what you see.
So Norma and Don, thank you for attending, and thank you for all your hard work.
Yes,
for
very much.
the NGS. And Stan, thank you for always attending, commenting when necessary.
Can I just say one thing?
Please.
This is really for Eric. Eric, Peter's public health issue would make a great theme, because there's lots of things you can pull out of the plan, like fire department, police department, recreation, and all that sort of stuff. So it'd make another interesting thematic way to cut across.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Only one or two more things. Okay, so we have correspondence from DEP regarding Chapter 91 general license certifications. So it's something generally we can file, but if anyone has any thoughts or comments on that.
Just so you know, I did forward it to Town Council and Jennifer Hughes to see if there's any impact or potential impact on anything we do today as a town. They just received it this afternoon, and so if they do have any correspondence to submit, we will submit it to you at the next meeting.
So this says that there's a new type of Chapter 91 license, which is a state license.
Like
It's
a
somewhat-
certification or
Right.
license, yeah.
And so there's not much we regulate in terms of that
You
type
haven't to
of
date, but
structure.
as you read that, the planning board will, in the future, be able to provide public comment if somebody does submit an application. So they will be able to, if they have any comments, submit comment to the process.
Is this more than just a one-page document?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because what we have here is the same page stapled 7 times. Okay. And I just didn't see it on that. I know it's on there. All right.
Go ahead.
Maybe I can just offer a brief description of what this is.
Please.
So this has to do with Chapter 91, which is structures in water. So both coastal and inland, and it applies to the legal definition of great ponds, which includes the lake. And it has to do with licensing docks. And I think it's a good idea that we've submitted it to Town Council, because I think it deserves a careful legal analysis of what this means. But at least the way the letter is written, it sounds like EPA is taking the role to allow an owner to self-certify through EPA's online system.
DEP.
I'm sorry, DEP. I'm sorry, DEP. DEP. A dock. And it allows docks up to, in inland waters, up to 300 square feet, no more than 4 feet wide, which means it could allow 75-foot docks.
But there's some other criteria too, as
There-
far as
there-
length and height and,
Well,
right?
but width, 4 feet wide.
Yeah.
For a total of 300 square feet, which would be a 75-foot dock. It also allows that there's other review processes, including Conservation Commission. But it looks like the role of the planning board is pretty much to comment.
And so, I guess what I'd be interested from town council is if there are, or if other towns do have bylaws regarding docks and things like that, I'd just be curious to see what's out there. I mean, if it is a chapter 91, there may only be so much we can do in terms of regulation, but I'd be curious, because it's, it's not in the ocean, so we don't have Army Corps of Engineers or that kind of stuff, but I'd be curious about other towns with lakes and great ponds, about if they do have their own regulations about docks, just what's out there.
And it's not clear to me how
Yeah.
local municipal regulations apply to this.
Right.
It's not clear.
Yes, I think we'd be curious if just some insight at some point would be appreciated on that. Okay, so could we get a motion to receive this and place it on file?
Second.
All in favor, roll call?
John Savage, yes.
Aaron Preston, yes.
And Ross, yes.
I say yes.
Yes.
Okay. Could we get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from May 1st and May 15th?
Motion to approve meeting minutes?
All second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes? Okay, and before we adjourn, just want to say that the farmer's market opens not next week, but a week from Sunday. So I think that's before our next meeting. And I believe there's also an artisan craft fair that same day at the mills. So great opportunity for some connectivity downtown to check out the farmer's market, walk over to the craft fair, and walk around and enjoy all the great establishments downtown, and hopefully it's not raining. So check that out.
I'd like to add one thing, if I may. I would like to thank Chris Allen for her service as an associate member. I think she was valuable over the last year, and sorry to see her depart.
All right, so for anyone who doesn't know, Chris's term ends at the end of June, and so we will definitely miss her and her insight. And so yeah, that is a great point.
Second.
Yes. All right. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
John? Yes.
Oh, yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Jen.
Yep.
Thanks, safe travels.
Yep.